The hall fell silent the moment I walked in. Not the polite silence of ceremony. The deep, held-breath silence of 1,000 beings who had just seen something wrong. I felt it before I understood it, a shift in the air, a collective stillness that pressed against my skin like a hand on my chest. I kept walking. Royal Guard protocol was clear: maintain pace, maintain posture, do not react to crowd behavior unless threat is confirmed. I was the only human in the Valethery throne complex. That fact had stopped mattering to me 6 months ago, somewhere between my third diplomatic rotation and my first real look at how the Valethery lived. They were not what the briefings described. The briefings said cold, hierarchical, dangerous. The briefings were written by people who had never stood in the lower markets and watched a Valethery elder braid a child's crest feathers with the same careful love a grandmother uses on earth. But the silence tonight was different. I took my position at the eastern pillar of the grand receiving hall, 15 meters from the raised dais where the Queen sat. Protocol placed me there. My actual job was to stand still, breathe slowly, and ensure that Ambassador Reyes, currently deep in conversation with the Trade Minister 40 meters to my left, did not die tonight. The Queen was watching me. I did not look directly at her. You do not look directly at Valethery royalty unless invited. But I had learned, over 6 months, how to see without looking. How to read the peripheral shifts of feathered crests, the angle of long necks, the way of Valethery's secondary eyelids moved when they were calculating something. The Queen was calculating. Her crest was fully raised, every iridescent feather standing vertical, which in Valethery body language meant maximum alert. Not anger. Not threat. Something closer to shock. She had not moved from her throne in 40 minutes. Every protocol official, every guard, every courtier in the hall had positioned themselves in the standard semicircle pattern that kept a clear distance of at least 12 meters from her dais. Except one. I heard the footsteps before I saw her. Small, light, moving in the wrong direction. The princess was 7 years old by human count, though the Valethery measured age in seasonal cycles, and called her something closer to third bloom. She was the Queen's only daughter. She had the same iridescent crest as her mother, though smaller, still growing in, and her neck feathers were the pale gold of someone who had not yet learned to control her emotional displays. Everything she felt showed in those feathers. Right now, they were flushed a deep rose red. She was curious. She was walking toward me. Every guard in the hall had gone rigid. I saw it in my peripheral vision. A dozen Valethery soldiers calculating the same problem I was already solving. The princess had no guard trailing her. She had slipped her handlers, which, based on the barely contained panic on the face of her personal attendant, was not a rare occurrence. She was moving through the gap in the semicircle formation, past the invisible line that protocol demanded all non-royals maintain, and she was heading directly toward the eastern pillar. Toward me. I did not move. Moving would make it worse. Any sudden motion near the Queen's daughter, in the Queen's hall, surrounded by the Queen's soldiers, would be the last motion I ever made. I understood this with complete clarity. The Valethery were not aggressive by nature, but they were protective in ways that made human parental instinct look mild. Their word for the maternal bond translated loosely as the thing that cannot be reasoned with. The princess stopped 2 meters in front of me. She tilted her head. Her crest feathers shifted from rose red to a pale, curious silver. She looked up at my face, my flat, featherless, single-eyelid human face, with the concentrated stare of a child who had decided that something was more interesting than the rules about it. She said something in formal Valethery. My translation chip caught it half a second later. You smell like the rain season. I did not smile. Smiling at a Valethery shows teeth, and showing teeth is a challenge display. I kept my face neutral, my hands at my sides, my breathing steady. The hall was so quiet I could hear the queen's throne creak as she leaned forward. The princess took one more step toward me and sat down. Not near me. Not beside me, at a respectful distance. She pressed her small shoulder against my leg, tucked her knees up, and settled herself on the floor at my feet the way a child settles in when they have decided they are staying. The silence in the hall became something else entirely. It became the sound of an entire civilization holding its breath. The queen had not moved, but every guard in the room had their hand on a weapon. And I understood, with perfect, terrible clarity, that whatever happened in the next 60 seconds would determine whether I lived through the night. Nobody moved for what felt like a full minute. I counted my own heartbeats. 12, 13, 14. The princess had tucked one small hand around my boot, not gripping it, just resting her fingers there, the way a child holds something familiar. Her feathers had gone from silver curiosity to a warm amber content. She was content. The hall was not. The queen's chief protocol officer, a tall Veiltheri named Vessel of Tides, who had tolerated my presence in the complex with the patience of someone enduring a persistent headache, had gone completely still near the dais steps. His crest was flat against his skull. In Veiltheri body language, that was the equivalent of a human pressing both palms to their face and whispering, "What do I do?" He could not approach. Moving toward the princess now would mean moving toward me, and moving toward me with any speed or direction that the queen's guards read as aggressive would trigger a response I could not survive. He was trapped by the same geometry I was. The princess had, without any apparent awareness of what she was doing, created a situation that had no clean exit. I did not look at the queen. I wanted to. Every instinct I had, military and human and deeply self-preserving, screamed at me to make eye contact, to signal that I was not a threat, to communicate across the 15 meters of charged air between us. But I had learned enough in 6 months to know that direct eye contact from a non-royal to the queen, in a moment of elevated crest display, was a dominant signal. It would make everything worse. So I looked at the wall. I breathed. I kept my hands exactly where they were, visible, open, still. Ambassador Reyes had gone quiet. I could not see his face, but I could see that the trade minister had stopped speaking and was watching the dais with the careful expression of someone who had just realized the negotiation they were in had become significantly more complicated. The princess shifted against my leg. She said something else in Veiltheri, quiet, more to herself than to me, and my chip translated it as, "The tall ones always stand too long." Despite everything, I almost lost my composure. I kept it. I kept it because losing it, even a small, involuntary expression of amusement, was something I could not afford. I was already the most visible non-Veiltheri in a room full of beings who were deciding, right now, what I was. A threat. A curiosity. A problem. A guest. The categories were not the same, and only one of them let me leave this room on my own feet. The queen moved. Not much. A shift in her posture, a lean to the right, her secondary eyelids sliding half closed. In a human, I would have read it as someone settling in to watch something play out. In Veiltheri, I was less certain. I filed it and held my position. Vessel of Tides moved instead. Not toward me. He was too smart for that. He moved along the outer edge of the hall, keeping the full 15 meters of protocol distance, until he reached the nearest guard captain. I watched them in my peripheral vision. A conversation conducted entirely in the micro-movements of crest and feather. I could not read it at that resolution. The guard captain did not move toward me either. What she did was more interesting. She turned to face outward, away from the dais, and, in a series of small gestures that I was only beginning to be able to interpret, she sent the same signal to every guard in the room. Hold. I had learned that gesture in my second month. It was used in protective formations when a subject was in a sensitive position, and intervention would cause more harm than stillness. It was the gesture you used when the thing you were guarding was exactly where it had chosen to be, and moving it would break something important. They were using it for their princess. They were using it, by extension, for me. I exhaled slowly. Not with relief. Relief was premature and, possibly fatal, but with a particular kind of steadiness that comes from understanding the rules of a situation even when the situation is unprecedented. The guards had read the princess's posture and her feather state, and made a calculation. She was calm. She was safe. Whatever she had decided about the human at the Eastern Pillar, she had decided it without fear. That was the thing that mattered to them. Not my presence. Her choice. The princess looked up at me again. Her head tilted in the opposite direction from before, and her crest feathers shifted to a pale blue that I had learned to associate with the Veiltheri state of asking. Not demanding. Asking. My translation chip caught the word before she finished the gesture. Sit. I processed that for exactly 2 seconds. 2 full seconds in which I ran every possible response through everything I knew about Veiltheri protocol, body language, hierarchy, royal interaction, and the specific political situation of this specific night in this specific hall with this specific child pressed against my leg. Sitting beside a Veiltheri royal without invitation was a breach of protocol serious enough to end diplomatic careers, and, in older periods of Veiltheri history, lives. But the princess had invited me. And, refusing the invitation of a Veiltheri royal in front of the queen and the full court was a different kind of breach, one that communicated contempt, which was worse than presumption. I sat down. Slowly. Carefully. I folded my legs beneath me and settled on the floor beside her, leaving a respectful distance, my hands on my knees, my posture upright, but no longer the rigid column of a guard on duty. The princess made a sound. Low, resonant, clicking slightly at the edges. My chip translated it as good. The hall made no sound at all. But I felt something change in it. The pressure that had been pressing at me since I walked in, that dense, held-breath wrongness, shifted. It did not disappear. But it changed shape. It became something more like attention than alarm. The queen's crest feathers, at 15 meters, settled slightly. Just slightly. Not down. Not calm. But fractionally less vertical than they had been 30 seconds ago. I focused on the middle distance. I breathed. I waited. The princess began to tell me something. A story, I thought, from the rhythm of it, though the content was too complex and too fast for my chip to catch everything. I caught fragments. A creature with too many legs, a river that ran backward on feast days, someone named Brightwater who was either a sibling or a fish, possibly both. She told it with the particular intense commitment of a child who believes completely in what she is saying and has no interest in whether her audience can follow. I listened. And slowly, in the way that impossible things sometimes do, the room began to breathe again. By the time the formal reception moved into its 3rd hour, the princess had fallen asleep. She had listed sideways against my arm with a total commitment that only children and the very tired can manage, her crest feathers slow pulsing in the amber gold of deep rest. My arm had gone numb at the elbow. I did not move it. Ambassador Reyes had found a reason to drift closer to the Eastern Pillar. He stood now about 6 meters out, in a position that could be read as coincidence, though we both knew it was not. His face was professionally neutral. Only his eyes communicated anything, and what they communicated was, "I have no idea what is happening, but please do not let it become an incident." I gave him a fractional nod. Working on it. The trade minister had resumed the negotiation, though the conversation had taken on a distracted quality. Everyone in the room was doing what I was doing, maintaining the appearance of their intended purpose while actually tracking the dais, the eastern pillar, and the small sleeping figure that connected them. Vessel of Tides approached me. He did it correctly. He came from the side, not the front, at a pace that could not be read as aggressive, stopping at a distance that was technically still within protocol range for senior courtiers addressing hall staff. His crest was low, controlled. His expression, as much as I could read it, was the veil theory equivalent of someone trying to remain professional in a situation they had never trained for. He said, quietly, in the trade dialect, "You understand what she has done." It was not a question, but it expected an answer. "I understand that she sat down," I said. "I understand that she invited me to sit as well." I responded to her invitation. "You responded correctly," he said. There was something in the way he said it that wasn't quite surprise. More like a revision of an expectation. Most off-worlders would have stepped away. They are told to step away. Stepping away from a royal invitation would have communicated disrespect. Yes. He was quiet for a moment, watching the princess's slow-breathing feather pulse. She does not do this with others. She is cautious with new people. Her crest has been gold since she sat down. Gold. I knew that one well by now. Gold was the veil theory color of safety, of belonging. I did not encourage her. I said, "I know. That is the part Her Majesty found interesting." I processed that carefully. Her Majesty has been watching. Her Majesty has been watching since you came through the main entrance this morning. The princess noticed you then. Her feathers went silver, curiosity, and did not change back. He paused. We are not accustomed to the princess showing prolonged interest in anyone outside the inner court. We are particularly not accustomed to it with. He stopped. Humans, I said. Off-worlders, he corrected, with something that might have been diplomacy or might have been genuine. The queen is waiting for you. Every muscle in my body tightened. I managed not to show it. The princess is asleep, I said. Yes. The queen is aware. She is waiting for the princess to wake. I looked at him directly for the first time. What does she want from me? Vessel of Tides held my gaze with his secondary eyelids half closed, and the expression I had learned meant, I am telling you something important, and I need you to hear it completely. She wants to know, he said, why her daughter is safe with you. The princess woke an hour later. She woke the way children wake from deep sleep, slowly, then all at once, sitting upright with a small confused sound before her eyes fully focused. Her crest feathers went through 3 colors in 2 seconds, the gray of disorientation, the silver of recognition, and then back to gold when she looked at me and, apparently decided that the situation was acceptable. She stood, straightened her ceremonial wrap with the automatic dignity of someone raised to care about such things even half asleep, and then looked up at the dais with an expression I could only describe as bracing herself. The queen was watching. The princess crossed to the dais at a measured walk. I stayed exactly where I was. The whole hall had pivoted on its invisible axis to face this moment. Conversations dropped to murmurs, and even the musicians at the far end had let their instruments go quiet. Mother and daughter held a conversation that I could not hear. My chip caught fragments, too soft, too formal, too deep in dialect for full translation. But I watched the feathers. The queen's crest, which had been elevated all night, began to lower by degrees. The princess's gold held steady, her neck raised, her tiny body carrying the particular uprightness of a child who believes completely in what they are defending. She was defending me. I understood that much without the words. I understood it from the way she gestured once, precisely, toward the eastern pillar where I was still sitting on the floor, and, from the way the Queen's gaze found me at the end of that gesture and stayed. I met her eyes. Protocol said I should not. But Vessel of Tides had said the Queen was waiting for me, and the Queen was looking at me now with the full weight of a being who had absolute authority in this room and was choosing to use it as attention rather than force. The secondary eyelids were fully open. The crest was still elevated, but the leading feathers, the longest, the most expressive, had tilted fractionally forward rather than straight up. In Veil Fairy body language, I knew what that meant. It meant, I am looking at you. Tell me what I am seeing. I kept her gaze. I did not perform anything. I did not smile or bow or attempt the formal greeting gestures I had practiced and was probably still doing wrong. I simply held still and let her look, the way you hold still when something needs to decide what you are, and the only thing you have to offer it is the truth of your stillness. The Queen lowered her crest. Not fully. Not to the position of familiarity or warmth, but to the position I had seen her use twice before, in moments of formal acknowledgement, when she was conceding something to someone she had decided deserved the concession. It lasted 3 seconds. Then she turned back to her daughter and said something that my chip caught completely. You have good judgment. The princess's gold feathers flared so bright they were almost white. Vessel of Tides appeared at my side again. He was carrying something, a small token, carved from the same pale stone as the throne dais, pressed into my hand before I fully processed his approach. A hall gift, he said quietly. It means you may return. I closed my fingers around it. To the hall? I asked. To the complex. To the court. At the Queen's invitation. He paused, and I heard something in his voice that I had never heard from him before. Something that was not quite warmth, but was adjacent to it. At the princess's recommendation. Across the hall, Ambassador Reyes was very carefully not reacting to anything. I stood slowly, returning my spine to the column of a guard on duty, the token in my closed fist, the numb feeling leading my arm by degrees. The princess looked back at me once from the dais steps. Her crest feathers were still gold, but threaded now with a pale blue of asking, and then, before I could parse what she was asking, they shifted to something I had never seen before, a deep, resonant green that my chip did not have a translation for. I looked at Vessel of Tides. He was quiet for a moment. It is an old color, he said at last. We do not use it often. It does not translate well into trade dialect. He considered his words with the care of someone choosing the right ones from a large and careful collection. The closest I can give you, he said, is recognized. I stood at the eastern pillar for the rest of the reception. I stood still and breathed and kept my post the way I had been trained to keep it. But something had changed in the architecture of that room, in the invisible structure of where things were permitted to exist and what distance meant. When the reception ended and the hall began to clear, I was the last non-Veil Fairy to leave. Protocol required it. I walked to the main archway and paused at the threshold the way you pause at the end of something that needs marking. 15 meters behind me, on the dais, the princess raised her hand in a gesture my chip translated as until the next cycle. I placed my fist, the one holding the hall gift, against my chest. It was not a Veil Fairy gesture. It was a human one, quiet and old, meaning I carry this. The Queen saw it. Her crest lifted once, a single, deliberate motion, and then settled again. I walked out into the corridor, into the cool recycled air of the complex, into a night that had started as the most dangerous of my career and was ending as something I did not yet have the right word for. But somewhere in the Veil Fairy language, in an old color that did not translate well, I thought the word might already exist. 2/2